Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to this edition of Twitter Takes, where today we'll talk about Phil Jackson and why he was fired by the Knicks. So, Phil Jackson, let me tell you something, is an all-time great coach, one of the greatest coaches in NBA history and basketball history, maybe even sports history. Coach Jordan, Kobe, Shaq, Bulls, Lakers, 11 championships. That's pretty impressive. Yet, he tried to become an executive, and that clearly did not work. He was one of the worst executives in the league, and the Knicks didn't get any better. In fact, you could have said they're worse off when he got there. They were very poorly run, and his coach, he hired Derek Fisher as a coach in 2014. Here's why. One, he knows Derek Fisher very well. He coached him in Los Angeles. And in LA, they ran the triangle many times. So Derek Fisher knew the triangle, and that's what Phil Jackson wanted to run. So he hired Derek Fisher. And he fired him after a year and a half of coaching. And Derek Fisher, I don't know what's up with Derek Fisher right now. Kind of seems like a crazy guy. I don't know what he's doing. A few weeks ago, I heard he was in a high-speed crash or something. I don't know. And look, Derek Fisher's out of control. But anyways, hired Derek Fisher. That did not work. You hire Hornacek, which Hornacek came from Phoenix. They don't run the triangle out there. In fact, I think they ran a high-paced offense dominated by, I believe, the point guard. And so they brought him in. And Hornacek did not want to run the triangle. Neither of the players did. I don't think Carmelo Anthony wanted to. I don't think anyone did. But they did it anyways. And here's the thing about the triangle. It worked great. Phil Jackson is a genius for coming up with it. It worked just great. In the 80s, or in the 90s, with the Lakers, it was one of the best things you could use in basketball. Think about it. You won 11 championships. You're the greatest coach running that triangle. It's genius. It was then. But it's outdated. It doesn't work in the modern NBA. The modern NBA is not built on... Apparently, I watched some video tutorials on the triangle earlier today, and apparently it's... You give it to a big man, you give it to the 5, and it involves kind of mid-range jump shots and all. It just doesn't work anymore. You try to force the Knicks to run it, only team in the league that currently runs it, and just doesn't work. It clearly didn't work. They won 17 games, 31, I believe 32 games. And whenever the Knicks, it looked like, okay, we're making progress, we're a decent team, this is going to be a decent year, looks like things are going to be okay this year. They just fall off. They just fall apart. And I don't know if it's the locker room characteristics. I don't know how good the locker room is. Apparently when you lose, it's clearly worse. Is it lack of effort? Is it unable to sustain consistency? And look, here's what Phil Jackson's done. So, hire Derek Fisher first. And, he had a chance to get Steve Kerr. Okay? Steve Kerr, the coach of the Warriors, right? And he offered him less money than what Kerr took to the Warriors. Would they have won two or three championships, been the best team in this era? No, since obviously they're far less talented. And I bet Steve Kerr would have been a good coach. I bet they would have made it to the playoffs, and they would have been fairly successful. But he made the right call. Steve Kerr is a genius for what he's done. One, by coaching the Warriors, is such a smart coach there, such a great coach, knows how to run things there, but also knew not to go to the Knicks, which I was great decision. So you have Fisher, which at the time, maybe you can understand, as I said earlier, knows the triangle, he knows Phil Jackson, okay, maybe they can work fine together. And then you re-sign Carmelo Anthony. Now that was a little bit of a dilemma. Do you want Carmelo Anthony to leave and you're stuck here with nothing? Or do you want to keep Carmelo Anthony? And he chose to keep him, making almost $25 million a year. And clearly, Anthony was hurt the first year, missed half of the year, came back. Carmelo Anthony's played pretty well as far as it's worth. Has done great on the offensive end. Has been their leading scorer, of course. Clearly their best player. Yet his defense is down. And Carmelo Anthony, does he want to be there? He does. He wanted to do when he resigned. He wanted to win a championship there. and that's clearly not going to happen. Like I said, for all of last year, I knew, okay, Carmelo Anthony needs to get out of there. He's been there for 6 years. It hasn't worked. And right around mid-April at the closing press conferences, Phil Jackson said, Carmelo Anthony needs to leave. This is best for him. This is best for the team. He needs to leave. And Carmelo Anthony's still there. Of course, I've heard rumors of him going to Houston, along with him and Paul George to join up Chris Paul and James Harden. And his best move was drafting Porzingis. That was a great move. And look, he has become a star player, looks like a future superstar, has showed flashes clearly last year. But the problem is, that young in your career, you got to deal with all this media, all this, it's hard to say, media, drama, attention, news. He's kind of in the middle of all that. And look, Phil Jackson a week ago was trying to trade him, which I don't understand it. He's 21, almost 22, and you're trading your future piece, your best player in the future, who you're trying to build around, and what do you get? You probably get a first-round pick, but look, what the Knicks have done the past 3 years has not worked at all. It has only made them worse. Bad coaching hires. Fisher was a very poor choice. Hornacek, we'll see. Hornacek was clearly doing what's not his philosophy. He's still lucky to be there. Could have been gone after 1 year. And here's another thing. James Dolan is paying him $12 million a year. $12 million a year to be an executive. And I feel like Jackson was an offer he couldn't refuse. And he took it and wanted the challenge. He wanted to turn things around. When he got to Chicago, turned things around, won a championship. When he got to LA, his first 3 years there, won a championship. And he wanted to change the New York culture, wanted to get it back to what it was, wanted to get it to a winning standpoint. And it just didn't work out. And Jackson, granted, his first draft and second draft did not have anything to work with, did not have any first-round picks. That was a big problem. So that was not his fault. He had nothing to do with those. But he's made some poor moves, like Derrick Rose move. At the time, I thought, okay, that's a pretty good move. You're not giving up a whole lot. This is kind of high risk, or not high risk, medium reward kind of deal. And you're hoping, okay, maybe they can make it to the playoffs. And then they signed Noah, which at the time I thought, that's decent. He's far worse than he was. And now it looks like the worst move ever. He's playing 23 minutes a game. Averages 5 points a game offense to begin with, and his free throws, I don't know, like a 5-year-old. His motion, two-handed chest pass, and he didn't work out. Is now being suspended by the league for violating their drug policy. And that was a disaster, and he's going to be unmovable. He's going to count greatly against the cap. Is going to affect them greatly. That was a terrible move. I know they're trying to bring in defense and rebounding. It just clearly didn't work. Derrick Rose, he played pretty well. Had his best year in probably 3 or 4 years. Played well. Is clearly an NBA player. But it didn't work. At the beginning of the year, back in October, I said, okay, they can be a 4 or 5 seed. They can make maybe they can make a pretty decent playoff run. Maybe they'll get lucky and move up to 3. Maybe they can, with the talent they have, the names they have, maybe they just play good basketball. And you look at their lineup, it was Rose, Lee, Anthony, Porzingis, Noah. This could be a pretty good team. And, they were 5 games above 500. They're looking pretty good. And then they crashed, like usual. Now they're terrible. Now they're awful. And, their most recent draft pick a week ago, Frank Nicotella, something like that. I think that's his name, from France. He's a point guard. He's 18. He's very raw. And you know why he's drafted? He fit the triangle. So Phil Jackson, a week ago, was still trying to run the triangle. Still trying to do it. And they drafted someone to do it. He passed up on Monk, who I thought was going there. Malik Monk, who might be the best scorer on the draft. To get an 18-year-old point guard, another project, which, I was looking at I think I was reading the New York Post, or I think it was the Times, and, there's a link to it that says Anthony did not approve of drafting Porzingis. Well, He did not want to play with a project, which you're 7'3", you're 19 years old, clearly have a lot of weights to lift. You're obviously going to be very raw. And Porzingis was very raw and still has a lot to learn. That's how much potential he had. And 7'3", and he wanted to win now. And same thing, Monk is 19 years old. Still has a lot to learn, obviously, being 19 years old. But he could be an impact scorer for them right away. And he passed on him. And Nikita Letta, who's 18 years old, and has to learn the triangle system at 18. And the reason why they drafted him is so he could learn the triangle. And Phil Jackson isn't there anymore. That was a bad pick. So you lost your best chance. And think about it. Another project. You draft 2 projects. Don't have a pick last year. Which again wasn't his fault. Was the New York Knicks. Very poor decision making. And that's the reason why they've won 1 playoff series since the year 2000. They've been in the playoffs just 3 times since 2004. They've not made it to the playoffs in 4 years. You know what? You know why the Knicks sell out every game and why it costs $80, $100 to get an upper deck seat? It's Madison Square Garden in the heart of Manhattan on 34th Street, inside of Penn Station, the center of New York City. That's why Madison Square Garden is so expensive. That's why people go. It's not like in Detroit or Sacramento or New Orleans if Anthony Davis and DeMarcus Cousins are no longer there. That's why the Knicks have a fan base. That's why people go. It doesn't matter how bad they are. It sells out every game. And Phil Jackson clearly didn't know what he was doing in these past 3 years. His coaching hirings, the moves he made did not make any splash moves. And they could not get anything done. Couldn't even make it to the playoffs. And talk about this. In 3 years, 16 teams make it. More than half of the entire NBA is in the playoffs. And you cannot be a middle-of-the-pack team, even slightly below middle-of-the-pack, one time. You couldn't make it to the playoffs one time. You didn't get any better. You had one of the worst records in the league with Carmelo Anthony. And that might have been a mistake to keep him with all the money, which, we know Carmelo Anthony now. We know what he did in 2011. Connect the dots. He was selfish. He wanted to go already. Couldn't wait 3 months. Leave then. Have those pieces to build around they gave up. That affected them right there. They lost a first-round pick in 2014. And then he re-signed. Now, other free agents didn't want to go there. In numerous articles, New York Post, New York Times, basically said free agents won't go there, so which is a great free agent destination, and maybe they would have, since it's due to the triangle. No one wants to play with the triangle, and Phil Jackson never got it. The triangle doesn't work anymore. It worked in the 90s. It worked with the Lakers, but not anymore. It's like saying in baseball, oh, we know how they did in the 1920s and the 30s and the 40s. We're going to make sure our pitchers pitch 9 innings every game. That doesn't work anymore. They'll get tired out. And they're off. Since now they rely on power relievers, lefty and righty specialists, all sorts of stuff. Or in the NFL, if you try to run 50 times a game, that doesn't work anymore. And what the Knicks did is just doesn't work. And Phil Jackson never wanted to abandon the triangle. He wanted to use the triangle now. Maybe he said, forget about it. The triangle doesn't work anymore. Maybe we can try other stuff. All they wanted to do was run the triangle. He was obsessed with the triangle. That's why they kept using it, and they kept losing. No one wanted to go there. Think about it. The Knicks have been so poorly run. I think ever since James Dolan took over. He took over, I think, in 98, bought the team, and they've been bad ever since. Has hired big names like Phil Jackson, Isaiah Thomas. They're great at one thing. Doesn't mean they're going to be great at running a team or coaching or whatnot. And they just lost those pieces. You talk about the 2012-13 team that was really good. Carmelo Anthony won the scoring title. J.R. Smith was 6th man of the year. Tyson Chandler was in his peak as a rim protector. and all that stuff. Well, those pieces left. They gave away key pieces. They got nothing out of that, like trading away J.R. Smith and Amon Shumpert. They basically got nothing out of it except for a 2019 first round pick, a second round pick. Okay, second round pick in 2 years. Who knows what that's going to be? It'll probably be nothing. And just all those moves, being offered $12 million a year. Do I blame Jackson for taking it? No. If I was offered $12 million a year, I would take it. But Jackson just didn't have it left anymore. He was old, was well past his prime. They just didn't work out. That's really all I can say. Now, they could have been smarter. They could have made smarter decisions. And the one good draft he had that he got to see live down in 2015 may have worked. And I have no idea where they're going forward. Look, they're going to be terrible next year. And look, I advise Carmelo Anthony to leave right now. He's got to go. Of course, I heard other rumors that maybe he's less likely to leave now that Phil Jackson is not there and not trying to get him out. And the relationship was not good. The team relationship was not good. His relationship with coaches wasn't good since he was sort of a coach in the front office room. He had the power to make himself a coach. If he wanted to coach, he should have coached. He should have coached the triangle himself if he really wanted to emphasize it instead of forcing other people. Derek Fisher, that's one thing. But Jeff Hornacek didn't know anything about the triangle or knew much less about it than what Derek Fisher would have or what Phil Jackson did and tried to reteach the triangle. And no one wanted to do it anymore. Not Carmelo, not Derrick Rose, not Porzingis. Oh, and I forgot to mention, when Fisher was fired, they hired Kurt Rambis. Well, he knew everything about the triangle. So they hired him to be the assistant coach, the interim coach. Did not stick, obviously. Got fired or was not renewed. And look, the triangle is old. There's a lot of things in life that work great for a long time and were once very useful, but now just don't work anymore. Are very useless. Like I don't know. Here's an example. 1992 TV was once very useful at the time. Doesn't work anymore. It's like saying if you try to emphasize old school things and try to make them fit now. Things get outgrown. They get outdated. They just need to go away. They just don't work anymore. Okay, things that once were great are now just don't have their use anymore. Like the triangle offense. And what do I think of the Knicks going forward? Well, I want to ask myself one thing before I move on. How surprised was I by the firing? You know what? I was not surprised at all. It might have been a little more surprising since he wasn't fired on April 14th or anything like that. Actually got to do the draft, which when I start to think about it, you let him do the draft and you let him get Frank Nicotul, something like that, and who fits the triangle, and then you leave the next week and now you're stuck with that guy. I don't know what they're doing. I just can't imagine what they're doing. Like they're drafting these projects, these European guys. They hope one day will work. And look, this team is going to be built around Porzingis. And they might have one more year left of Melo. I really hope he doesn't stay there anymore. It just doesn't work. And I don't know how bad they're going to be the next 3 or 4 years. But look, it's going to be a long time before they're good anymore. Look, final words to say. The New York Knicks are one of the worst run teams in the NBA. Worst run teams in the NBA. No doubt about it. They've been that way for 15 years. In April, the Madison Square Garden doesn't have the buzz that it used to in the 90s for the playoffs anymore. It is empty. It is the Rangers that dominate MSG now. And I don't see the Knicks being any good anytime soon as long as they keep doing what they've been doing. Very bad front office management. So, thank you for listening. And that's our take. Phil Jackson. It was good that he left now. He needed to leave 3 bad years. That's long enough. Just didn't work. Didn't work.